Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody on this nice Saturday morning. There's still people coming in from the waiting room, so they'll have to join us on the run, I guess. And I'd just like to introduce myself for those of you who haven't met me before. My name is Deanne Cairns, and I'm the Executive Director of the Saskatchewan Genealogical Society. I would like to start our session this morning by acknowledging that here in Saskatchewan, we are on treaty land. SGS and its branches are located throughout Treaty 2, 4, 5, and 6 territories. The original lands of the Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, Cree, Stoney, as well as the homeland of the Métis. I'd also like to just take a minute to thank the College of Certified Saskatchewan Genealogists for partnering with us on this initiative. A couple of housekeeping items. As you just heard, the session this morning is being recorded and it will be available for viewing on the SGS YouTube channel. And I'll put the link in the chat for you as soon as I'm finished here. Keep in mind, we ask that your microphone be on mute during the presentation, just to reduce the background noise for our speaker this morning. The handouts for this session were emailed to you yesterday to the email address that you used to register for the session. But I will also put a copy in the chat for you in case you didn't receive it. Our presenter this morning is Thelma Caldwell. Thelma is a member of the College of Certified Saskatchewan Genealogists and a longtime SGS member. After her presentation this morning on military records, Thelma will address questions as time permits. We have some questions that were sent in advance, and those will be addressed first, and the rest will be taken as they come in. I think that's about all I have for housekeeping. I'm going to turn it over to Thelma now.
Thanks, Deanne. Oh dear. Where's slide? Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Canadians have participated in conflicts all over the world for centuries. From the early colonial times to present day, men and women have stepped forward to serve and protect. Whether on land, sea or air, overseas or on the home front, there was always a record of their movements and service. The tricky part is, do they still exist? And where do you find them? One of the best sources for military records is the Library and Archives Canada. Most of what you hear today can be found on that site. The Archives holds an extensive collection of records of the Canadian men and women who have served their country in the military and in the early years of the Northwest Mounted Police. When you go to the main page, click on the Military Heritage and there you will find a variety of choices. Here are just a few. The colony of New France was constantly threatened by Iroquois nation and often unable to defend itself. In 1665, the King of France sent a regiment of 1,200 men to help out. Once the danger had passed, the soldiers were encouraged to settle in the colony. Few records relating to military service in New France between 1608 to 1760 have survived. Some may contain a few nominal rolls of soldiers, but most lists relate only to officers. The British government stationed regiments in Canada for its defense from the close of the 7 Years' War in 1763 until 1871. The British headquarters papers, also known as the Carleton Papers, contain records during the American Revolution and provide details of the services, sufferings, forced immigration of loyalists of all classes. The loyalists were American colonists who remained loyal to the British Crown. Many of them served under the British during the Revolution. They later settled in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Quebec, and Ontario. These provinces' archives will have records relating to the Loyalists. The Book of Negroes is another record contained within the papers and gives information such as names, gender, health, distinguishing marks, status, free or a slave, origins, names of their white associates, and names of ships used to carry them. Many loyalists and their descendants submitted petitions for land, and these petitions are indexed. The War of 1812 took place from 18th of June to the 16th of February, 1815. During this conflict between the United States and Great Britain, many military events occurred on Canadian soil. There are no service files for the Canadian militia. However, the archives holds a unique and vast collection of records. Their names can be found on muster rolls, pay lists, claims, certificates of service, land grants, and medical registers. Many of these documents are only available in the original format and have not been microfilmed or digitized. There is a database, but it does not include the name of every person who served, only those who appear in the records that have been indexed for the project. Though I didn't know if I had any ancestors who served at that time, I did a random search of the index just using the last name Caldwell. I got 40 hits, which when expanded gave a bit more information. The South African War of 1899 to 1902 is a key event in the military history of Canada. It was the first time in its history that Canada dispatched troops to an overseas war. A total of 7,368 Canadians and 12 nursing sisters served in South Africa. The surviving files are part of the Department of Veteran Affairs funds. This database includes the service files, medal registers, and land grant applications. Veterans of the Boer War were entitled to 320 acres of Dominion land. The archives holds the land grant applications, but the actual documents have not been digitized. Most veterans opted to receive script in the amount of $160 rather than the land, or later sold their grant to someone else. Pending the transfer of Rupert's Land to Canada, the federal government sent survey crews to map the Red River area in 1869. The Métis became concerned about the effect new settlers would have on their own lands. They seized the main Hudson Bay Company trading post, Upper Fort Garry, and as other incidents happened, British and Canadian troops were deployed to the area in August of 1870. Names of the Canadian volunteers who served during the Red River Rebellion can be found in the Red River Register of Service. Those who served were awarded the Canadian General Service Medal, and references can be found under the Military Medals, Honors and Awards 1812 to 1969 database. The Northwest Rebellion in 1885 was a violent 5-month insurgency against the Canadian government, fought mainly by Métis militants and their Aboriginal allies in what is now Saskatchewan and Alberta. Just over 5,000 military men from Ontario and Quebec and Nova Scotia were mobilized to fight the rebels. Those who served were awarded the Northwest Canada Medal, and again, the references can be found in the military medals site. That database also includes references to those who served in the Fenian raids in 1866 and 1870. Library and Archives holds the personnel files of the soldiers, nurses, and chaplains who served in the First World War with the Canadian Expeditionary Force. These records have been digitized and can be found in the personnel records of the First World War database. These include Indigenous soldiers as well, but there are other references which can be found in the records of the Department of Indian Affairs. There are no service files for the militia in Canada during the war, with the exception of the non-permanent active militia. Those units performed a variety of military tasks in Canada, mainly guarding strategic sites such as armories, bridges, and canals. And they are also in the personnel records database. When searching the database for World War I records, you can enter just a name or narrow it down in the advanced search. The results are linked to the digitized files in PDF format, which you can print and save to your computer. This is my great uncle Armand. He was born in St. Damas, Quebec, and when his parents and siblings later moved to Saskatchewan, he and his sister remained behind to help out an aunt and uncle. It was here that Armand was conscripted on the 1st of March in 1918 and served with the Canadian Expeditionary Force. He returned home safely, but I recall hearing something about him being gassed at that time. This is his attestation form, which states his name, address, birth date, birthplace, religion, occupation, whether married or single, name and address of next of kin, date and place of enlistment. Of course, there were a few other records in that file. This is my great uncle David Weir Wilson, who was born in Scotland and immigrated to Canada in 1902. He married Pauline Wolschuk of Gravelburg in St. Boniface, Manitoba on the 1st of March, 1916. And 2 days later, he enlisted in Winnipeg. David's file states he was a bombardier and a gunner. Also in the records were the name and address of his father back in Scotland and his wife's address in Saskatchewan. While in the service, he was very limited of what he could write to family. Here's a sample postcard to his sister in Scotland. Basically, he wrote his name and the date, and then crossed out what did not apply to him. When I did a search on the Library and Archives Canada, this is the results, with a link to a service file of 50 pages. Some were duplicates and some were blank. He returned home safely and received the British War Medal and the Great War for Civilization 1914 to 1919 medal. Canada did not have an Air Force during World War I, and those wishing to enlist would have joined the Royal Flying Corps, the Royal Air Force, or the Royal Naval Air Service. Personnel files for those British units are in the custody of the National Archives in England. Library and Archives does hold some nominal rolls of Canadians who served with those forces, but these lists must be consulted on site. The service ledger sheets for Royal Canadian Navy and the Naval Reserve are also in the library and archives. These records have been indexed and can be searched in the collections. There are more administrative and financial, the service files are more in nature, administrative and financial. Most files contain a variety of documents, which may include enrollment applications, discharge forms, and separation allowances. If the individual continued his naval service after the war, his First World War records may be in his post-1918 file. The National Archives in England also holds records for those who served with the Royal Navy, the Royal Navy Reserve, and the Royal Naval Air Service, which included volunteers from Newfoundland. The files for nurses who served with the Canadian Expeditionary Force can also be searched on the Personnel Records database. The Second World War, the third major conflict Canada participated in, and resulted in over 45,000 Canadians dead. When Britain and France declared war on Germany, Canada dispatched strong military forces to Britain as soon as possible. Canada's armed forces grew rapidly. In September of 1939 alone, over 58,000 Canadians enlisted. By December, the first Canadian troops were on their way. Ottawa had also placed its navy at Britain's disposal and sent 2 fighter squadrons to Britain before the end of 1940. Many others would follow. As the Allied forces took German prisoners of war on the front lines of the Second World War, Great Britain grew concerned that enemy forces could be strengthened if the prisoners were ever rescued through an invasion of the British territory. To prevent that from happening, Canada agreed to take the German POWs. Internment camp number 133 in Lethbridge was the second largest internment camp in North America, with 13,341 POWs, immediately moving into the camp when it was completed in November of 1942. The prisoners required care and were guarded by the Veterans Guard of Canada to ensure none escaped. On the 27th of January, 1943, Great Uncle David desired to serve again and joined the Veterans Guard of Canada. It was at Lethbridge that he would die later of a heart attack. This is the telegram that was sent to my grandfather. To William Wilson, Kildare, Sask. Deeply regret to inform you that your brother, L98786 Private Wilson David Weir, died as a result of natural causes on the 1st of January, 45. Stop. Unless you request otherwise, we'll proceed with the following tentative plans. Body will arrive at Kildare for internment at 11:15, 4th of January, 45. L. Corporal Cox, JB, will be in charge. Stop. If you desire other arrangements, please advise. L. Officer Commanding 38 Company, VGC. Any personnel who died in the service of his or her country for up to World War II may be listed in the Book of Remembrance. The 8 books contain the names of more than 120,000 Canadians who have given their lives in the service of our country. You can search by name and get this result and see the actual page, which includes your service person's name. This is my dad, George Wilson, born and raised on a ranch south of Kildare to William Wilson and Annie Sherris. At age 17, he, along with 2 brothers, aged 18 and 16, had tried to enlist and were having no luck. They came up with a plan. The oldest, Dave, stated he was 19, and George and Mac became 18-year-old twins. To the shock and dismay of their mother, the plan worked. They were sent for basic training at Regina, Portage la Prairie in Manitoba, and later went on to Borden, Ontario. About that time, Mac was held back in quarantine when one of the men in his barracks became contagious. Dave and George continued on to Halifax, where they boarded the HMT Andres on the 11th of November, 1941, landing in Liverpool on the 24th. They would serve the whole war with the BC Dragoons. Mac later departed Halifax on the Pasteur on the 8th of December, landing at Greenock, Scotland on the 22nd, and he became part of the Lord Strathcona Horse Armored Regiment. Among the papers, Dad's records showed that he was wounded on the 19th of March in 44. My grandmother also had a newspaper clipping about it. This photo was sent to one of his sisters. Dad, as a driver mechanic, is the one driving the Jeep as they take a German officer to detainment. All three Wilson boys returned home with a chest full of medals: the Italy Star, the France and Germany Star, the 1939 to 1945 Star. The Defense Medal, the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal, and the War Medal of 1939 to 45. This is my second cousin, Lucien Gaucher. He was born on a farm north of Quebec to Émile Gaucher and Blandine Gingras. Upon completing his grade 12, he immediately signed up to serve with the RCAF on the 17th of October, 1940. Graduating as an air observer in Godric, Ontario, it wasn't long before he was posted to Britain and assigned to Squadron 407. He was 21 years old when the plane he was on did not return to base. None of the crew were ever found. I did a search for him in the service files of the Second World War, War Dead 1939 to 47. There were no digitized pages, but it did give me this information. Lucien was in the Book of Remembrance as well. I did an extensive search and I came across the Saskatchewan Virtual War Memorial site, which shows Lucien's name as listed on the memorial at Runningmead, England. Included were the GPS locations for that memorial, one of his hometown, and at the lake named for him in northern Saskatchewan. There are more than 3,800 of these lakes, islands, rivers, and rapids in remote areas of the province. They were named after fallen Saskatchewan servicemen by the provincial government in the 1950s and 60s. Also attached were 3 letters, 2 reports, and part of a service file in the search results. World War II was the first conflict in which women officially served in the armed forces in roles other than nursing. Many Canadian women wanted to play an active role in the war and lobbied the government to form military organizations for the women. The military was forever changed. Women were now able, for the first time in our history, to serve Canada in uniform. More than 50,000 women served in the armed forces during the Second World War. The Royal Canadian Air Force Women's Division was established on the 2nd of July in 41. This was followed by the Canadian Women's Army Service in the 14th of August, and the Women Royal Canadian Naval Service, aka RENS, on the 31st of July in 1942. Military nurses, which began during World War I, continued to provide their care, with 4,480 nursing sisters serving in the war. The occupations open to women in the forces were initially limited and all non-combatant. Women filled many positions. They were assigned jobs such as drivers, laundress, medical orderly, batwoman, canteen helper, and officer orderly. Some of them were mechanics, parachute riggers, wireless operators, tower control in coastal defense units, and code breaking. A lot of these women found themselves within range of enemy guns, and some lost their lives. This is my second cousin, Simone, daughter of Noe Alex and Aurora Gaucher. She was born and raised at a farm north of Kildare. After working for a time in Gravelbourg, she ventured to Regina. There she made friends with those who planned to join the Canadian Women's Army Corps, and she enlisted too. Basic training was at Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue in Quebec. She was later posted to Berryfield Camp in Kingston, Ontario, where she worked with an officer who later became her husband. There are no access restrictions on the service files for members of the Canadian Armed Forces who died in service between 1939 and 47, including those killed in action, those who subsequently died of injuries later in service, and those who died as a result of an accident or illness while in service. You can search that database, the service files of the Second World War, War Dead, 1939 to 47. For all other Second World War service files, access restrictions apply. The personal information contained in the service files is protected by the Privacy Act. Only staff may access them. Restricted records held by the Library and Archives Canada service files after 1919 include the permanent force, the Second World War, and those who did not die during the war, and the Korean War. Canadian Forces Reserve members 1919 to 2007 are also in their files, but note that not all files were retained for the reserves. And the Newfoundland militia members who served in the Second World War, and some of their files were not retained. The Korean War started on the 25th of June, 1950, when Northern Korean troops invaded South Korea. United Nations forces soon joined the fighting. More than 26,000 Canadians served on land, at sea, and in the air during this bitter conflict. Sadly, 56 Canadians died. Long seen as the forgotten war, the Korean War is now recognized as an important chapter in Canada's military history. The Library and Archives holds their records. For those that died, their names are in the Korean War Book of Remembrance. It wasn't until 1989, following a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling, that the Canadian Forces opened all occupations, including combat roles, to women. In that year, Private Heather R. Elskaby became Canada's first female regular force infantry soldier. In 1991, Lieutenant Anne Reifenstein, Lieutenant Holly Brown, and Captain Linda Schrum graduate from the artillery training as the first female officers in the combat arms. In 2003, Anne is now a major and is the first female to command a combat arms subunit. 2006, Canada has its first loss of an active combat female soldier fighting on the front lines in Afghanistan, Captain Nicola Goddard. In 2010, Major Eleanor Taylor is the first female to lead an infantry company and is deployed to Afghanistan. In 2017, Canadian Captain Megan Couteau becomes the first woman ever to command troops guarding the Queen of Buckingham Palace. In 2018, Major Catherine Blas, first military female test pilot to serve in the RCAF. In 2020, two-star Lieutenant General Christine Whitecross, retired, was Canada's top-ranking female military officer and commandant of the NATO Defense College in Rome. Today's men and women serve in the Canadian Armed Forces as peacekeepers. Missions were first under the United Nations umbrella, but presently we are more active with NATO. Some of the missions have been to the Sudan, Liberia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Western Sahara. Until recently, the Canadian Armed Forces military was training and had a capacity building operation in Ukraine. The Department of National Defense supports the Canadian Armed Forces who serve on the sea, on the land, and in the air, with Navy, Army, Air Force, and Special Forces to defend Canadians interested at home and abroad. The department holds the following restricted records. Canadian Forces regular members currently serving were released from service or died in service between the 1st of January 1998 and the present. Canadian Forces Reserve members currently serving were released from service or died in service between the 1st of March 2008 and the present. You can submit a request to the National Defense online or by mail. It's always easier to get service files if you have the regimental or service number. You could find that on a gravestone, on a discharge certificate, in a regimental history book, or by contacting your local legion. The museum, the Saskatchewan Military Museum in Regina, and the Saskatoon Museum of Military Artifacts may also be able to help. To the men and women who fought in any and all wars, by land, sea, or air, as well as the medical corps, the engineers, the railway troops, forestry service, dispatch and signal corps, on the front lines, the home front, and those who paid the supreme sacrifice. We give our thanks and our promise to remember that without freedom, there can be no enduring peace, and without peace, no enduring freedom. Lest we forget. I can't hear you, Deanne.
Sorry about that. I was speaking on mute there. So I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation, Thelma. It was very informative. Lots of information there and lots of sites to check out in the handout as well. So hope you enjoyed that. And we have a few questions that were sent in advance. Sharon, we'll go with your question first. Merle, are you with us today? Yeah. I don't see you on here, so we might just answer that one by email because she's not with us today. So Sharon will take your question. I have an ancestor in the Second War that was killed in France. I have info from the cemetery there. Does Saskatchewan have records for soldiers born in Dysart but killed overseas?
Sharon, as your ancestor died in the war, you could do a search for records on the Library and Archives website. Just go to the service files of the Second World War, War Dead, 1939 to 47. Just enter the name and it should get his unit service number, reference, and volume numbers. You may still have to apply for access to the file. But note that ancestry.ca has a genealogy package digitized on their site for the World War II war dead. A genealogy package is a selection of the most relevant documents in the file, which highlight, summarize the person's service, including enlistment, unit services with family details, medal entitlement, circumstances of death, etc. So this might be all the information you want to know, but if you need more, you can also order the complete file. The cost is 30 to 40 cents per page, but there's no knowing the total number of pages, so it could be hundreds of pages. Library and Archives.
I do have his record.
Oh, good.
I have the cemetery, all that information. But what I was wondering is people that were in service that died overseas, are their names placed in a memorial from where they came in Saskatchewan?
Okay, he may be found in the Saskatchewan Virtual Memorial. They have a quick search button at the top right, and if you enter the name, he might pop up there and give you more information that way. Depending on, you said he was in Dysart, it could be that he's found in a Dysart history book under their military section. If they have a war memorial, he would probably be on that as well.
Do they have a historical society in that area?
And Dysart, I'm not sure, but that's something we could look into for you.
That'd be great, because I'll tell you, I went on Google and I found information about somebody actually with my family name that donated land years ago for a recreation center, and also somebody that my ancestor's name worked in the post office, but I got no way of finding out if this is my family until I could find somebody in the Dysart area, like yeah, but how many people with that last name were in the town of Dysart?
What's the last name?
Magda, M-A-G-D-A.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna see if we can.
Go ahead, Deanne.
I was just gonna say, we'll check that out when we're looking for someone to connect you with, Sharon, for in that area of the problem.
That would be great, because also my grandmother came in 1910 into Dysart and with her parents, and she was one of 18 kids, and their name was Danchuk. So I have a lot of relatives in Dysart.
Oh, maybe you'll hit the mother load.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. And this is why I wanted to join you people, because I figured the pot of gold was in Saskatchewan.
Well, we hope we can help you out.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Merle, you're still, I don't see Merle. Maybe what we'll do with that one, Thelma, is email the answer to
Yes.
her for her question if she's not here. I
Yeah,
see.
we can do that.
Okay, I see Candace has a question. Go ahead, Candace.
Hi. I've got two great uncles that were in the Second World War and one that was in the Korean War. and they did not get killed in action. They did not pass away. So that means I basically can't get any of those records right now, or will we ever be able to get any records, or what's kind of the
You
scoop on it?
You can apply, request permission to access the records. If you go on the Libraries and Archives site under the World War II tab, it'll tell you how to apply, and the Korean ones will be similar.
I
If
thought you
you
had to
know
be
their, yes?
I thought you had to be like a certain type of relative. I thought like it said you have to be like their child or their spouse or something. Like I thought I
How
didn't.
long have they been dead?
Oh, well, depends, but like 20 years, 30 years, something like that.
Yeah, okay. You don't have to prove you're a relative if they've been dead for more than 20 years, but you have to prove that they're dead.
Okay, yeah. One of them might not be 20, no, one of them's definitely not 20 years, but so, but am I like, I thought it, so can I still do that? Like even if they're not dead 20 years, I can't do that.
Okay, do they have any children?
Yes, but say that the problem is we don't really aren't in touch with them close. So like I know those people would not do that. Like they would not take the step to help me with this. So that's what I'm kind of
Okay,
I'm like yeah, I'm hooped. So
can you, if you have that person's obituary that hasn't been dead for 20 years,
yeah,
does it list your parent under surviving relatives?
I don't think so. I think they just put things like survived by nieces and nephews and stuff. Like they don't say like, yeah, I don't think they have a specific name. I'd have to double check, but I don't think so.
Or predeceased by brothers or sisters? Did they mention that?
It
What
might be
about finding the tombstone?
Oh yeah, I've been able to do that. Like I can take a picture of that or have it on.
They
whatever.
accepted that for my father.
Okay. So I guess just try and see what, maybe, I don't know, just try, I guess.
I would send his obituary
Mhm.
or his tombstone, whatever, to show that he's dead.
Mhm.
Check the obituary to see if your parent is mentioned, whether on there at all, because that'll be a link to your name, and then you would show how you're related to your parent. And so that, you know, and in the wording request, you would say, this is my uncle,
Mhm.
so-and-so, and then go from there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I just, when I looked at it before, it didn't seem hopeful that they would let it release the information, but I guess I can just give it a try. So thank you.
For the Korean War, no, yeah, sorry, I haven't done any research on the Korean War, so I don't know how hard it is to get that information, but World War II was easy once you just have to have patience and wait for them to get back to you. And it's even longer now, I've heard.
Okay, Terry, just to let you know, the handout was emailed to you last night, or it is in the chat here. I've posted it in the chat if you can pull it out from there. Peggy has a question. Where would I find records for war brides from Holland?
The Library and Archives Canada does have a link about war brides. Was it in the First or Second World War?
Second World War.
Okay, there's a better way to find that information right on Library and Archives website. If you go again to the military records section and scroll down towards the bottom, there'll be a war brides button there.
Thank you.
Okay. Gwen, my mother was a parachute rigger in World War II in Ontario with the RCAF. Would you know of any websites that would have info? I do have her military records. Thanks, Gwen.
Okay, when I was looking for information for somebody else about parachute packers, anything I found said that if they had enlisted, their records should be in the Library and Archives Canada. I've also noted that the RCAF Women's Division was not the only ones that packed parachutes. Sometimes the WACs did as well. So my first choice would be to go to Library and Archives Canada and check with them for service records. There might be articles and books written about that information as well. And also maybe check the Veterans Affairs, because they have quite often can give you good leads on where to find records. And some of the links that were on the handout, I think the Canadian War Museum in Winnipeg, I think, has a lot of information as well, and they might be able to narrow down your search.
Thank you. I do have her military records from the library. I was just wondering if there was more information about the offices in Ontario there. Thank you very much.
Was there was she assigned to a specific regiment?
It was Belleville, Mountain View.
Oh, okay. My cousin was at Bellevue or Belfield?
Bellevue, I believe.
Bellevue. Okay, that's where the training was. Yeah, yeah. There could be more like a history book or a file pertaining to that camp, which might give you more information, maybe not particularly about her, but about their life at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rita has asked, I am searching for the complete military record of my father. I want to know where he was during the time he served overseas.
Good morning.
Good morning. Was that the first or second war?
Second.
Second. Okay.
Yes.
And he did not die during service?
No, he came back.
Good, good.
I wouldn't be here.
Okay, well, there again, the Library and Archives Canada is the first place you would go for records. And if you click on the Second World War tab, it'll tell you how to order them. And there again, you're gonna be waiting a while before they get back to you. I think it was always a long time, but it's even longer now after COVID because of restrictions that kept people from working and so on.
Okay,
But that would be my first place to look.
Yeah, I had gone in and I kind of got a link as to where to go to. It's called a formal request for
Yes.
information. Okay, so I have that link to go in there to do that. So but that's going to give me like, okay, he was here on May 1st and he was over here on July 21st, and it's going to do that, like that kind of a whole link of where he was and where he served overseas.
Yes. It might not say specific places, more general country places, because they didn't want
They didn't want
spies to access their information. But in my dad's records, it was outlined basically everything that he was, where he was at, or whether he was on leave, whatever, it was all listed on there. And as I most saw that when he was wounded, it was also listed there.
Okay, yeah, and I see there's another question later on, so I'll wait to hear the answer to that question. It's also something I wanted to know, so.
Okay, Nancy, I see that you sent an attachment in chat. Is that, you want us to have a look at it? Is that it? Nancy? Okay, we'll move on for a
I
minute.
can't
yes,
open that.
newspaper article.
Okay.
This is Nancy.
Okay,
Mhm.
It's a newspaper article. And I'm just not sure what it means in layman's terms.
okay.
It's just a very short article.
I can't open it right now from here.
Yeah, I can't open it either. I tried. Give
Okay.
us the, go ahead and read it to us.
Okay, so it says military service court adjourned until next week. Judge Simmons disposed of 25 additional cases on Wednesday. 25 appeals from the military tribunals were heard by Mr. Justice Simmons yesterday morning, after which the court adjourned for the hearing of cases in Calgary until Saturday, January 26th at 10 o'clock. Daniel Meskey, who worked in the planing mill at Medicine Hat, claimed under the Wartime Election Act allowed with leave to military authorities to reopen. So do you know what that means? Like, he didn't serve in the military for very long. And for some reason he was released, and just recently I found this newspaper article. So obviously he went to court in Calgary and for some reason asked to be released, I think is how it was interpreted. Do you want me to read it to you once more, just the bottom part?
Yes, please.
Okay. Daniel Meskey, who worked in the planing mill at Medicine Hat, claimed under the Wartime Election Act, allowed with leave to military authorities to reopen. So he was claiming something under the Wartime Election Act.
Yes, I wonder if he was trying to get a pension. No?
Let me check the date. I don't think so.
Okay.
It was dated
Uh,
January 17th, 1918.
1918. Oh, boy. Okay.
Yeah,
You have his military records?
I do. And it doesn't say
And-
anything there about his discharge.
Okay. He doesn't have a discharge paper or anything, or doesn't state when he was discharged?
I think it states when he was released, yep. But I don't have an actual discharge form
Okay.
like they would. You could find them with the World War II military records, the discharge certificate, but I don't have one for Daniel for World War I.
Yeah.
So he did serve for a certain amount of time, but not very long.
I wonder if there was a follow-up article on that, like if you could get access to court records or even the newspapers, if they were following that first court session, they may be continued on for that.
Yeah, and newspapers.com is free today, so
Oh, it is. I've done a lot of searching for his name in newspapers.com,
okay.
and that's the only thing that has come up.
You might do a quick search for the courts or something else to do with that article to see if it reconvened later.
Possibly, but it sounds like, according to the title of the article, it sounds like it was that the judge disposed of 25 cases on that day. So he dealt with them and then it was done.
Yeah, could be.
So Daniel was released for some reason, maybe to go back to work because he had a job, and whatever it is he asked for, it sounds like they gave it to him. The judge granted.
Granted him leave or granted him, yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah, that's,
I just thought you might know what the Wartime Election Act meant. And I did Google it, but the answers that I got didn't seem to fit.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but we can try to find out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe he was given leave to reopen his business. Maybe it
Mhm.
was closed during wartime and used for other reasons. And maybe he got leave to reopen his business. I don't know.
Yeah, he was an employee, so it just sounds to me, how I'm interpreting this is that he no longer wanted to serve in the military. He wanted to go back to work. And it was close to the end. Let's see here. Well, this was January 1918 and the war ended in November.
I'm going to try and see if I can find something else for you. And
Sure.
Deanne will have your email so we can
Yeah.
send whatever we find, if
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, and I can email you this article if you like.
That'd be
Sure.
good.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, Elaine has a question. Is there a means of accessing the names of the men in my grandfather's gunnery unit in World War I? I've been waiting 3 years for my dad's World War II service record after supplying all the information. Is there any way to speed up this process? We wish.
Yeah, yeah. As far as the other men in your grandfather's unit, that would probably fall under privacy. I don't know. Unless there's a history, there could be a history of his unit. A history book published. Quite often, you will find that. And I think Library and Archives has a link to check on that. And also Veterans Affairs could help with that. Your local Legion in your dad's area would be able to help you with that. Unless somebody submitted photos with names of that unit, I don't know how you would get that information.
You know what's so frustrating, Thelma, is that my grandfather was a photographer, and he has all these pictures of World War I and going across the ship. He hasn't got one name on any of the photos.
Oh,
no.
It's just so sad.
Yes, it is. Have you shared those pictures with the museum in Winnipeg or even Library and Archives? I'm sure they would be very interested in them.
I could try. He enrolled in Montreal, and he had a group of friends whom he hunted and fished with all his life and drank. And so I've got pictures of all of them, and we know their names. But I suspect they all enrolled together and kept up a lifelong friendship. But I'd really like to know who was in his unit.
you know,
Did he belong to the Legion? Sorry, Dan.
No,
Did
go
he
ahead.
belong to the Legion?
I have no idea.
I would check, because if they're friends for life, they were, probably joined the Legion together, and they might have talked about others that were in their unit.
Yeah, and social media is great for that kind of thing too. If if you know the unit that he was in and whatever.
Yes, I do.
Us genealogists are ones that share this information far and wide. So you put it out in a couple of groups, and you might turn up someone who has their grandfather in the unit and can maybe help you out.
What unit? Where do you suggest I search? Like a Montreal Genealogical Society, or?
You could, we can post it for you. There's, it will go far and wide if you put it in a couple of groups like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sharon says she's been waiting 4 years for her dad's records. So it's a long wait, but That's all the questions I see right now in the chat. Does anybody else have a question?
Oh, hi. Hi, it's Pauline. I'm a little late. I had computer problems. So, but my question is, I had an uncle who joined the army towards the end of the Second World War. And I have a photograph of his family walking to the train station and sending him off. Now, how would I start finding any information out about that?
About his military service, Pauline?
And not only that, he enlisted and he went overseas, but the war ended before he was sent anywhere. So I have no other information. This is sort of a family story. So he never actually went.
That happened quite often, or they maybe got sent to basic training, but that's as far as they got. They served in Canada.
That could be. I don't know. It could be.
Yeah. If they did that, they still will have a record of them. They're still considered as being in service.
Okay. So where would I start? Like, you know,
the library, again, Libraries and Archives Canada will have their
Oh, okay.
records.
Library and Archives. Okay.
Yeah, and there again, go to World War II tab on their site under military, go to World War II, and it'll tell you how to access their records.
Okay.
It sounds like asking for the genealogical pack is quicker than asking for the complete file.
Okay.
How quick, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I was lucky that I got my records years ago before internet. And it seemed long at the time, but now I think I was lucky.
All right, any more questions?
I have a question.
Hello.
Have all of the soldiers' records from World War I been digitized to this point?
To my knowledge, they have. Have you looked and you couldn't find your person?
Right, and I've even asked the library to search and they couldn't find them. I've contacted the Legion in Broadview, but I got no response. So, and I've contacted the Legion in Saskatoon and they have no record. They referred me to the local Legion. Well, there's nothing there. And for the Broadview book that they published, I submitted all of the information, so that's no help.
You're your own source, eh?
That's right.
Oh, well, do you know what unit he was in? What did he serve under?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I do know I have the attestation papers for two of his brothers and an uncle from the same area, but I just can't find his. And I'm certain he was in the services because I remember my mother and my aunt talking about it. But it's interesting, I haven't found anything to date.
Huh.
Have you contacted Veterans Affairs?
No, I haven't done that. I will do that following this because I just realized that that's another source I could use.
Yeah, that would be a step, I think, to try if you had no luck on the website.
I was at a genealogy conference here in Saskatoon, and there was people from the archives there, and they looked for me, and they couldn't find it either. But I also contacted the Ottawa branch, and they couldn't find him. So,
yeah, Veterans Affairs might be your next step. Just they're more likely to dig for you rather than a local branch.
Right.
Maybe they're just don't have access to that information, or they don't have the time or feel they don't have the time to look for you.
right.
Someone else is suggesting, could he have been in the Merchant Marines?
No, I remember my mother and aunt talking about him being in the trenches.
Yeah, I guess probably Veterans Affairs is your best bet. Hey?
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Darlene says, thank you for a great presentation. And we're right on time. I don't see any other hands up or questions, so I assume everybody's got the answers they were looking for or learned what they were hoping to find here. So thank you again, Thelma, for the excellent presentation. This is our last chat with the genealogist. We'll take a summer break now, and hopefully we'll start up again in the fall. We haven't confirmed that yet, but we're hoping to. So stay tuned for information on that. SGS has one more presentation before we kind of take a break from presentations for the summer, and that'll be on June 4th. And it's Lynn Palermo again. Any of you that took part in Lynn's presentation last month, she's going to do a presentation for us on Zotero, which is a program that she uses to organize her and build her sources and citations, which is something I know I sure need help with. So that's coming up, and there'll be some information out on that very soon. And again, thank you, Thelma. And thank you all for joining us this morning, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.